All right, welcome in everybody. Welcome into the class. We'll get started here and we'll learn some stuff to move forward. So first of all, good news. I have organized with the bookstore and they have the access codes in stock, right? This was actually kind of surprised that it worked out this well. I've had a number of semesters not work well when trying to organize with them. We were able to get it to work, so everything should be fine when you buy the access code. It should work for your current license, and it won't cost you anything. So if you go to the bookstore in person and just tell them this is the class I'm in, they'll take care of you. If you contact the bookstore online, they will too. My understanding is there's like a couple extra steps if you're going to do it online. It's kind of weird because it's free, right? The school, basically what's happening is we saw that first spring where we had COVID, we saw a huge drop in enrollment, like it was a big enough drop in enrollment that it was bad for the college, because we saw basically, I think people were like, oh, I'll just take it in the fall. People were kind of hoping things would be better by now, which they aren't. But people thought it might be better by now, so they thought I'll just wait, right? And so enrollment was down like upsettingly low, where it's bad for the college. So what the college said was, we want to get people taking these math classes, because math was kind of the worst. If you poll people, the one they have the biggest anxiety about, right? I'm sure I don't have to tell most of you, the class that people are most scared about taking online is mathematics. And since statistics is one of our biggest classes that we offer the most sections of it. They said, okay, the school will cover the costs of the textbooks because we want students, we're trying to incentivize students getting in here and taking these online classes. So right now, the license won't cost you anything. Now, the process is a little weird. My understanding is, especially if you do it online, you have to, I think you pay for the book with a credit card, but then they reimburse you, or they run your credit card for $0 or something like that. I'm not 100% sure. I've heard it described, but the bottom line is your credit card is going to end up in the end being charged $0. But you know how sometimes, like, if you do something, you rent a car, you get a hotel room or something, they block off a chunk of money, and then the next day you get that money back, so it didn't really cost you anything. I think it might be something like that. I'm not really sure. But the bottom line is you shouldn't have to pay for anything. So if you're someone who's on campus and you're comfortable going into the bookstore, that's probably the easiest way to do it. So go there, tell them what class you're in, and they'll find the license for you, and they'll get you the license. If you want to do it online, whatever you need to do. Now, I'm a little... sometimes the bookstore runs out of stuff. And if the bookstore runs out of the stuff, in this case, it might be, sometimes it's 6 to 8 weeks before they get a new shipment. So I don't know how many they have in there, but I wouldn't wait on it. It's like, this is one of my big things, procrastination, right? Not procrastinating is one of your biggest keys to success. So you're going to hear me bring it up all the time. But this is another one of those cases. Those of you who are sort of go-getters and you think, oh, there's something I need to get done, why don't I just do it now? You're probably, high probability you're going to go in there or order it online and you'll get your free license. If you wait and people snatch up the free licenses, there might not be any left for you. And then you can't really wait 6 to 8 weeks because you won't end up passing the course if you wait that long to do homework. So I would get in there soon and get that taken, because there's other classes using it too, right? So if all of you go in now and buy it, you're probably good. But if you wait, then the other classes may have bought those licenses. I don't know how many they have in there, but there have been semesters where I have a student in week 3 or 4 go in to try to buy the book, and then, they're out. And then it's a hassle. And in this case, you'll have to pay for it because you'll have to get it through some other means, and then you'll have to purchase it. So I highly recommend that you don't wait on this, right? It's basically you're saving yourself, I forget if it's $80 or $90 or something like that. But, I remember being a college student, waiting tables to put myself through school. $90 is significant at that age. So, if you can save yourself $90, why not? Right? That's a shift or two. You don't have to go work at whatever job it is that you're doing. So try to do that. Right. We want our students to save money in these classes. We like the people think, oh, there's a conspiracy for professors to get people to spend money at the bookstore. I get no benefit at all from people giving the bookstore money. Right. In fact, I usually try to go around the bookstore, but since they're offering free licenses for people, I feel like, well, that's a big service to my students. So I'll use the bookstore this semester. So please do that. All you have to do, just contact the bookstore. If you're confused, you can call them on the phone, or you can show up in person if you're comfortable with that. I'm one of the people, I'm still not going a ton of places, especially now when we're in the midst of things blowing up a little. So if it makes you uncomfortable to go to the bookstore in person, that's fine. Call them on the phone, email them, whatever you need to do so that you can get that license while they still have free ones available. Okay? So right. Oh, and the way it'll work, so the way this works is they give you a code. So if you go to the bookstore, they're going to give you like a paper, it's like a piece of cardboard, and it almost looks sometimes like it's trash, like an advertisement or something you'd throw away. It's just like cardstock. When you open, at least this is how it used to be. Sometimes they have like digital versions now, but you peel the little cardboard back and it reveals a number on it. Like it's a not necessarily a number, but it's letters and numbers. You know, you've done this when you install Microsoft or something. You have to like put in the code to verify that you purchased it. It's the same thing here. You'll just go into your homework and it'll say something like, you are currently on free trial. You have 7 days left until your free trial runs out. And then it's going to give you an option to pay for it. You'll just do that. You'll click. I think it gives you options. Either you can pay now or insert your code. You'll insert the code, and then it's going to go, great. You're good for the rest of the semester. No more money. No more worrying about like your free trial running out too early. You're just taken care of, and you'll be all set for homework for the rest of the semester. If you let that free trial run out, it really runs out. It runs out to the point that I can't even look at your grades. Right? It cuts you off from me. It's like you're being shunned or something. It's like you're non-existent as far as the work that you already did, and as far as my stat lab, it's like you don't exist. So make sure that you try not to have a lapse. If that lapse goes on too long, for one thing is you may miss out on the free licenses, but also then you're falling behind, and you don't want to do that. So is there any questions about that? That's kind of an important one for students. Basically contact the bookstore and they'll take care of you. Hopefully it all goes well. It's always kind of a bumpy road when I deal with the bookstore, but hopefully it should be. I think we've got everything all set. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions. If there are questions, throw them in the chat, and I'll take a look at them when we can. Okay, one thing I know I mentioned this last time. I just want to remind people. So remember, in the modules, there is the lesson and the assessment. I see a lot of people doing lessons, fewer people doing assessments. Most people have done at least the first assessment, but you want to make sure you're doing both the lessons and the assessments. They are both worth points, but in fact, the assessments are weighted to be worth more points. So even though we look here on this lesson is worth 13 points and this assessment is worth 13 points, the assessment is actually worth twice as much, because that's the way they're weighted in the grade book. Not exactly twice as much, but approximately twice as much. So you want to make sure you're doing both so that you get your full points for that. Okay? Are there any other questions just in general as far as people getting settled into the class, figuring out what they need to do, getting set up, any kind of stuff, or people feel like they're pretty good? Again, feel free to throw a question into the chat if you want, or if you want to raise your hand and ask the question, that's fine too. I see there's some action in the groups, people forming, let's see. Groups, yeah, we can talk about the groups. Is that the, yeah, so there's groups with a question mark. Basically, forming the groups that you're going to use for your projects. So again, I just want to make sure everyone understands this. You're each doing your own project, but it is very, very helpful if you're in a group and you're all kind of working on the same topic. You can help each other out a little bit, but you're still all responsible for doing all parts of the project. But it's certainly helpful if you can just say, I'm totally stumped on how to do hypothesis testing for our questions, and then someone else in the group can explain, and then the next chapter you might be explaining to other person. Yep, looks like someone's saying, anyone need an extra person? Let me know. So people are still coordinating. And I know it's weird. My lawn guy's out there making a bunch of noise. So hopefully that isn't too bad. Yep, so that's great. I see people in the chat right now organizing. Fantastic. If you are someone who needs a group, throw that into chat. If you're someone who has room for a group, throw that into chat. That's great. So so we've got the groups that you want to form. Right. And again, I know sometimes people get nervous about this. You're not asking someone on a date and you're not making a lifelong friendship. I mean, maybe you are, but it's, it doesn't have to be a lot of pressure. You're just sort of like, hey, we need a group. Do you all want to be in a group? And then you form a group. It's not like a high pressure thing. No one needs to be nervous. Also, I always have trouble with this because I use my iPad where it's a little harder. But yeah, so people are deciding how they're going to contact each other. You guys contact each other however you want. So for all the groups, if last semester I saw people using all sorts of different apps. People would need. Some people were saying they wanted to use Zoom. Other people were using other types of apps. Which, however you want to communicate, is fine. Yep, and I see people working together to find groups in the YouTube chat. That's great. If you're forming a group here, remember to go make a comment in the project groups, because remember, that's worth points. So even if you form a group here today in chat, go leave one in your project, this thing that's on the discussion that's on here. That way you'll get points when I go through and grade those in a few days, next week, probably Monday or something like that. So make sure you do that. You have a little extra time about putting your survey questions together once you form your groups. So what I will say is that date, September 12th, that I have for that survey questions, you really need to have your survey questions submitted by then, because we can't move forward with the projects until we have data. And we can't have data until you take the survey, and you can't take the survey until I have everyone's questions. So it's really important. Like, don't look at that like, oh, we need to get it in by September 12th. That's like the absolute last deadline. If you get it in even earlier than that, that's great, because it's going to be difficult if I form a survey and your questions aren't on it. You now didn't get to use your questions, right? So that's one where the due date is a pretty firm due date, and you definitely want to be on the right side of that due date, right? So that otherwise you've just made your project harder, and there's kind of no reason for it at this point. So make sure that those are the two things. They both are worth points, and the survey question, right? The groups, if you're already forming a group, you just want the points too. For your group. Since you formed a group, you might as well get points for it. Leave a comment in there. But this survey questions, this is setting the stage for you to be successful with your data for the whole semester. So we definitely want to set that up for you to be successful. Okay, great. I see people. Great. I see people connecting into groups. That's fantastic. Really helpful, especially when we're online and people are distance. It's a lot harder to get help. There is tutoring in the tutoring center, and you can still Zoom in for those tutoring sessions, or you can go there in person, whatever you're comfortable with. What I will say is we have a hard time getting good statistics tutors for the, or I should just say any statistics tutors for the tutoring center. So sometimes there's limited hours where the statistics instructors or tutors are only there for certain hours, because we don't get many. A lot of usually what we see in the tutoring center is it's people who are going the STEM route. So people are going to be engineers, mathematicians, chemists, stuff like that have to take all the calculus series. Then those people know math pretty well, so they end up making some money in the tutoring center, which is great. The problem is a lot of those people don't take statistics. And so when they're in there, they're not as familiar with statistics. So we try to get people who take statistics. When we see people really ace the class, we try to get them to become tutors. But a lot of times, they have other stuff going on. So it might be that if you want to use the tutoring center for statistics, you might have to go, they might say, 10 o'clock on Tuesdays is when we have our statistics tutor in there. And then you'll just, there's more hours than that, but you might have to go at a certain time. And then there's always my office hours. But the group is really helpful so that, if one of you is able to go to the tutoring center and then you learn something and then you can help out your group, that's great. That's a great way to do it. So it's really about collaboration, working together. The more you all work together, the easiest and less stressful this class is going to be for everybody. So that's where we're at with those two things. For anybody who came in late, I know there was a couple people who came in late. I'll probably say this a couple times today because I want everybody to know. The licenses that the school is purchasing for your homework this semester are in the bookstore. They're in stock. So see the bookstore. I would do it soon just to make sure they don't run out. Get in there, contact the bookstore, try to get your license for that. Okay? All right, great. This is great. Good collaboration, people working together. I should see about opening chapter 2 here. Most people aren't through with chapter 1, but we'll talk a little bit about chapter 1. We talked a little bit last time about data, but it was pretty quick. So we'll take sort of a bigger approach. Now, most of these ideas you should already be pretty familiar with by doing the lesson part in chapter 1, but I'm kind of going to expand, maybe give you a broader discussion than just these short little videos that you're watching, help you get a better understanding, and then hopefully put you in a place where you're comfortable writing your questions, because the questions that you pick for your survey questions, they are in some ways really going to affect how easy or hard your survey is. And as long as you're careful, and 90% of the time, 95% of the time, students pick great topics, but it can be sometimes you just pick a bad question, and then that makes it harder to deal with the data. Okay, let's see, so where am I? So I'm not, unless I missed it, it looks like people are mostly forming groups, which is great, but I'm not seeing any questions to me. So if there's a question to me, go ahead and get my attention. So we will be using, is there a question?
Yeah, questions. You were mentioning the assessments. Those are like the 3 to 4 questions that the lesson asked after, for instance, 1.1 objective 2, right?
Yeah, so for each of these, there's the lesson and the assessment. When you watch the video where it says 1.1 lesson here, I believe it asks you some questions. It should be asking you some questions. I forget specifically what 1.1 is like, but you kind of watch a video and then you answer a question, and then watch a video, answer a question. For the assessment is more like what you'd call a traditional homework, where you're doing homework problems, where you have a series of homeworks that some problems that you're working on and working through them. So the lesson is more like if we were in class and I would explain something, and then I would have you do a problem in class, and then I would explain something, have you do a problem in class. Whereas the assessment should be more made of homework. Does that answer your question?
Gotcha. Yeah, so I'm assuming I'm not doing the assessments. I need to look into that. Thank you.
Right.
Because I'm answering those questions after each video and each objective. But yeah, I'm not doing the full assessment. Thank you.
Okay, sure. Yeah. So basically, you just want to work your way down this chapter 1 module. So you just start at the top where it says, chapter 1 data collection. Start at the top and just work your way down through these. And when you get to the bottom, then you've got your projects. So really, every one of these you should be interacting with. So we've got that set up there. I know it takes a couple weeks for everyone to kind of figure out the system. So it's if you were confused by that, don't feel bad at all. It's totally normal, right? Of all of us statistics professors, we all do it a little bit differently. Actually, I'm now doing what one of our other professors is the one who set this up, and I really liked it. So I'm using it as well. But if you took another teacher for math, they did things differently. So I know it's a lot of differences. So yeah, just start at the top, work down. I would say do the lesson, which shouldn't take terribly long. Once you do that, then you go to the assessment. The questions in the lesson are pretty basic. They're basically just there to make sure you watch the video, because otherwise people skip the video and then just try to move ahead. But if you can't answer the question, then you didn't really watch the video, or maybe you didn't understand, and that's okay, and you need to watch again. But they're a little more simple questions, whereas the assessment is more like homework that'll be preparing you to do your project and understand statistics and stuff like that. Yeah. Okay, good. Glad we could shed some light on that. Okay, so working your way through chapter 1, then do the 2 project stuff at the end. Make sure you do it by the due date. Otherwise, you'll be missing out on points. Okay, so we'll kind of talk about statistics for a bit with our remaining time, and hopefully this will help you start to get a sense of what statistics is and why it's important and how we do it. Statistics is way more complicated than people think it is, right? So when we, like, what is it we're doing when we study statistics? Well, a lot of times you've taken mathematics classes, and those math classes were really based on like a number or one thing, right? You wanted to know, you have these problems about, I have this much fencing and I want to make a pen for my dog. What is the dimensions that give me the maximum area for the animal in its pen, right? And then you go through and you solve the problem, and you get one number as your answer and you figure it out. Well, what statistics is usually doing, this is sort of a broad overview, but statistics is oftentimes looking at sets of data. So sets of data are harder to understand, because what happens with sets of data is that we have different ways of describing them, right? So for instance, here's an example, right? People, when you give a test, people always want to know what's the average, and what they're really asking is what is the mean, right? In statistics, we don't use that word average because it's kind of a sloppy word that can be misinterpreted. But in statistics, we say the mean. So that's what people really want to know. What was the mean on this test? And that usually what they want to know is how much better did I do than the mean? But that's actually, as you'll see, that's actually not a very good way of measuring exams, is the mean. Because probably what happened is a few people who took that test, or I should say didn't take that test, ended up with zeros. Well, zeros bring down the mean significantly. So a lot of times people think, well, if I did better than the mean, that means I'm in the top half of the class, right? Nope. It doesn't mean that at all, right? Imagine if we have 9 people in the class get 100% and one person gets a 0. That means that your mean is what? Going to be 90? So that means that 9 people in the class did better than the mean. So you're not really in the top half at that point. And this is the kind of behavior that is not necessarily obvious, but is important when we start studying sets. Sets can be very strange. For example, another thing with means and test scores. What if we took a test and everyone in the class scored an 80? Everyone got exactly 80. So what would the mean be? The mean would be 80, right? So you go, okay, well, that people did pretty good then. The mean is 80. Yeah, that's pretty good. Well, what if we took the class, right? If everyone got an 80, that means everyone passed. Everyone has a B. That's not bad. Well, and our measurement for that was the mean. Well, another scenario that could happen is we take a test and half of you get 100% and half of you get a 60%. Well, the mean is still 80, right? We'll learn specifically about the mean here coming up, but most people are kind of familiar with what the mean is. If half of you got hundreds and half of you got 60s, the mean is still 80, but half of the class failed the exam, right? So in that case, we have 2 very different sets. We have one where everyone got 80 and did pretty good, and we have another one where the mean is 80, but half the class failed. So basically what we need with statistics is we need better tools for describing sets of data, okay? And that's what statistics is all about. We have a bunch of tools, and we're going to throw them at our data sets, and we're going to use them to basically make convincing arguments, either convince ourselves or in your project, convince each other and other people about what you learned. So the problem with that, or the thing that makes it difficult, is there isn't always a perfect answer to how to do everything. There's different ways of setting things up, right? You may sit down and every single person in your group has a slightly different looking histogram for the same question that you're all working on, right? So the question is, well, who's right? Who did the histogram the right way? Well, it's possible you all did it, quote unquote, the right way. It's just that you made different choices about how you wanted to present that data. And depending on what you're trying to do, it may be that one presentation is more convincing than the other. So it really comes down to, this is a class where you can't just memorize stuff. You have to be able to understand the tools you're using and then say, okay, what's the best looking histogram? Great news is StatCrunch is going to do a lot of that work for us. So you could make 5 different histograms in like a minute and then go, which one do I think best tells the story that I want to try to tell, right? So there's that. But if you get to a point, like some students kind of get locked into a stalemate, or they just kind of freeze because they're waiting for like the correct answer to show up, the exact right way to do this. And the truth is there isn't an exact right way, right? There isn't an exact right way to do some of this stuff. Some, like I say, there might be 4 of you in your group or 3 of you in your group make a histogram. You've all made slightly different choices, but they're all good presentations of that histogram. Some of you might make a histogram and then it's a really bad representation, right? So what you're trying to do is kind of find the best one and eliminate the bad ones, and just come up with the best one. But that's frustrating for students, because a lot of times students are like, look, just tell me the right way to do it. With statistics, it doesn't work that way, right? It's a little more complex than like a math class where I can just show you, here's how you factor everything. Now go factor 50 problems or whatever. And then you just sort of copy it. It's going to be different because you're all asking different questions. Even if some of you are doing the same topics like running, right? 2 groups ask questions about running, but you might be trying to understand different things. So even though it's the same topic, maybe even the same questions, if the underlying story you're trying to tell about that data is different, you're going to make different choices along the way. So I know that can be a little unsettling for students, but also it gives you some freedom. It gives you a little bit of freedom to know, all I have to do is try a little bit and I'll see what works and I'll go with that, right? I'm not going to look at your histogram and go, if you present a bad histogram, then of course you can lose points on your project. But it's not like I'm looking at the histograms and saying there is only exactly one way to do this histogram correctly, and you didn't do it the right way, so you lose points. If you give a histogram that isn't, maybe it's not the choices I would have made, but the histogram is well constructed for the story that you're telling about your data, then it's fine. Right? Then you did a good job with that. There's a question here. Is there any way to make a correction in the lessons? I think so. We can take a look at that. If it's not letting you in, feel free to stick around after class and we can take a look at that if you like. It's kind of hard for me to remember some of this stuff because it gives me the teacher view and it basically allows me to do anything I want. So I'll look at that with you. I think you can correct that stuff in the lesson, but we'll look at it in after class. Okay, so that's kind of what we're doing with statistics. All the chapters you're going through are going to be learning new tools that you can throw at your statistics. Now, the project at the end, I would think you would want to include just about every topic that we have. Now, sometimes there are certain topics where you go, that doesn't really fit our data, okay? And that's even something you could mention that in your project and say, well, we didn't think this fit our data, but you want to be careful with that, because if you're taking a major topic and saying, yeah, we don't think that correlation was the right way to approach our data, I'm going to be kind of doubtful. Right? If you say, oh, the stuff we did on like binary outcomes, doesn't fit, then that's true. A lot of you are going to pick topics where the binomial theorem and those ways of dealing with yes/no problems might not be super helpful for your problem. They might be, but they might not be. But if it's the major topics like confidence intervals, hypothesis testing, visuals, the main chapters, and you don't have anything from that chapter, my guess is you're missing things that you should have in there, right? So most of those you want to include. If there's a major topic for the course and you didn't apply it to the project, you probably should have, okay? And you're welcome to come to office hours. If you ever have a question, come to office hours and you can say, I kind of don't see how hypothesis testing would fit with my project. I'm thinking of leaving it out, and I will probably say, no, you definitely need to do some hypothesis testing. Let's take a look. I can try to help explain to you, if you're confused about hypothesis testing, help explain to you what you should be doing. Okay. So then what happens is, where does our data come from, right? There's lots of ways to do statistics poorly. Lots of them, right? In fact, it's very difficult to do statistics well. And this is why more of our population in general should understand statistics, because there are plenty of people out there who use statistics purposely to get you to do things, to control you, right? To get you to buy cigarettes, right? So, Philip Morris comes out with their, decades ago, Philip Morris came out with their statistics and say, yeah, our evidence shows there's no danger to smoking. It's not addictive and it's not dangerous, right? They literally had research that showed that. Well, of course they have research that shows that, but that's because you can use statistics in an unethical way, right? Like I mentioned before, there's a book called How to Lie with Statistics, right? So you go in there and you simply try to get your outcome that you want. That's why it's important that we try to do statistics in an ethical way, right? We try to do it in a way where we can, we're not lying to people. We're trying to sort of pursue truth for science and the good of society and stuff like that. Hopefully that's the route you take, where we're using statistics appropriately. And then there's just getting statistics wrong because of ignorance, right? I hear this all the time with politicians. I would say at least half the time, and probably 3/4 of the time that I hear a politician use statistics, they don't know what they're talking about. And that's all parties. I'm not even just attacking one party. So not to get political with it, just politicians in general, they hear a number, they say it. Most people that listen to it don't know statistics, so they hear it and go, oh, okay, well, he said some numbers, so he sounds like he knows what he's talking about. And I'm not even kidding. That happens all the time where, those of us who have math degrees know, if you're in a conversation and you start using numbers or you say a statistic, half the people in the room will just go, oh, okay, sounds like he knows what he's talking about. I'll just go with whatever he says. So hopefully I'm doing it for the right reasons. But if I'm Philip Morris and trying to convince you that, like, nah, don't worry about cigarettes, they're fine, that's bad, right? That's a bad way to go with things. So there's two ways that you can mess up statistics. You can mess it up intentionally because your goal is to mislead people about smoking or vaccines or, whatever. And not to get in the vaccine argument, I'm just saying there's a lot of good information about vaccines. There's a lot of bad information about vaccines, both, as you can see, just turn on the news. There's a lot of craziness about vaccines. So, the way our country is sort of handling this. But, people are throwing out data when you look at it and go, well, you're trying to make this argument about these vaccines not being effective, but actually your statistical evidence doesn't even make any sense, right? But most people don't have those statistical tools to realize what's wrong with the statistics they're being presented with. They just sort of agree with whatever someone's telling them. So statistics can be done intentionally poorly, and they can be done unintentionally poorly. And there's lots of ways to just do them poorly without realizing it, right? Some of you are going to make these mistakes along the way in your projects. Hopefully you figure them out by the time that you do your project and you can fix them. But also, there's nothing wrong with mentioning that in your project. Because again, the thing I'm looking for in the project is, what have you learned? I'm not expecting you to be, when you leave this course, you're not ready to be a top-notch statistical researcher at like a major company or something. You're going to leave here with a basic understanding of the basic tools of statistics, right? Not a bad idea. Those of you who want, more and more jobs are being replaced every day with software and sometimes robots and stuff, and mechanical arms that build cars now and stuff. But software is replacing many jobs. There are many people in college right now who will be replaced by software before they even graduate. Statistical work, there is going to be a demand for statisticians for a long time, right? There's going to be demand for statisticians and computer coders and stuff like that longer than there's going to be for a lot of other things. So if you're kind of wondering and you maybe like this class a little bit and you go, oh, statistics is kind of fun, you can make a good living doing statistics, right? You can make good money, good benefits, that kind of stuff, and your job will be around longer than many other people's jobs. So you'll have to take more statistics, but this class will kind of give you the basics for getting into it and starting to understand like the basic language of statistics. So when someone throws out something that's nonsense because they're trying to convince you to do or not to do a certain thing, at least you'll have the tools to go, That doesn't sound right. It sounds like maybe you're using the stats incorrectly to convince me of something. So we don't want either of those. We don't want to be trying to, lie with our statistics. And also, we don't want to do bad statistics because we don't understand them. So one of the ways that we do this is right off the bat, the way that you collect your data. And collecting your data is really important because if you collect your data poorly, sometimes you can't undo that, right? Like if you're solving an equation and you mess up, you can just go back and redo it and fix it, right? But if we go out and collect our data in a poor way, a lot of times you're done. You gotta do it again. And that might sound like it's not a big deal. It is. Collecting data for statistics can be very, very expensive, right? Very expensive, right? If you think about it, that's what Facebook is just a big statistical collection tool, right? It's so that they can collect tools about, what do you watch? What shows are you likely to watch? What products are you going to buy? Do you have a dog? Should we show you ads for? That's all it is. It's an ad delivery system. And how do they decide what ads to? Like we think of Facebook as, it's the platform where I can message my mom and I can talk to my friend and I can see my cousin's new baby. That's not what it is at all. It's basically a detective program that learns about us so they can decide what ads to feed us that we'll click on. And then buy something, right? So the whole thing is really just a big tool to collect data on us. And they use a lot of statistics to do that. That's one of the reasons statistical jobs are important right now is all these companies need statisticians to crunch all sorts of numbers on big data. So it's expensive to collect data. And it is, if you have to go back and do it again, it's rough because you go, well, we just spent, $10,000 collecting this data. And our data is no good. Now we got to do it again, right? And you'll see sometimes it's expensive because you need numerous employees, right? So I'll go through and talk about some of this stuff, and we'll talk about why it's difficult. Let me get So one of the most important things, randomization, okay? Nearly every type of data collection should involve some type of randomization. If you don't have randomization in there, a lot of our statistical tools can't even be applied because they don't work right. And then in most cases, it's just not, it just isn't going to work. So what does that mean? Well, it's hard. Like, for instance, we're breaking that rule in this class, right? We are not randomizing who's going to give us our data because it's the class. Now, why am I doing that? It's because of convenience, right? I'm going to conduct a survey. You're all going to post your questions for the survey. I'm going to create a big survey, and everyone in the class is going to take it. Well, that's not great because I've selected who is going to take the survey. It's all of you, right? That's not random at all. So what that means is, that would be a criticism if you go through and you do your project and you come up with some interesting stuff and we publish it, the first attack people are going to make is, well, your data is not randomized, right? So this is one of the balancing acts that you do with data. Now, we're not doing serious data that, a company needs or the government needs or something like that. We're just doing this as a learning exercise, right? So it's not a big deal that we're not really collecting data in a proper way. It's kind of the best way we can. But what you want to realize is this convenience data collection happens in real life too. And sometimes it brings you data that is totally misleading, right? So think about it this way, right? Like here's kind of an extreme. Let's say, and this actually happens. So say it's a month before the election, right? Trump versus Biden. They the last election that just occurred. A month before that, Fox News puts a poll on their website and says, who are you planning to vote for? Donald Trump or Joe Biden, right? And then MSNBC puts the same poll on their website. Right? Well, what are the results going to say? Well, the Fox News poll is probably going to say 95% of the people who responded are voting for Trump. So then they can say, hey, look, we ran a poll. We think 95% of people are going to vote for Trump. And then on MSNBC, it's probably not quite as extreme, but you still get a little bit of that. It maybe 75% of people on MSNBC say they're voting for Biden. And then MSNBC can report, well, we ran a poll and 75% of people are going to vote for Biden. Well, both of those numbers are wrong, right? Why? Because there was no randomization in who took it. In fact, they took the ultimate convenience survey, which is a survey on a website. If you go to a website and there is a survey posted on that website, it's useless. You are not going to get any kind of helpful information from that, at least if it's just like you randomly went there. It's another thing if someone gives you a code and says, please go to this website, like that's a little different. But if you just run across a poll when you're on Fox News or you're on MSNBC and you take that poll, that data means nothing, right? Because as we just saw, two MSNBC and Fox News running the same exact poll, getting like opposite answers. Well, who do we trust? You don't trust either one of them because they used a convenience survey, right? So it would be the same thing if right now, say I want to conduct a survey at school and say the school wants to know how many students are ready to take online classes versus, this is literally questions we're asking, versus how many students want to continue taking online classes in the spring. Okay, well, one way I could do this is I could go wait at the tables where people, when people check in on campus to get their wellness check or whatever they're calling it, so that you can go on campus. I could stand there, and then I could just ask each person that comes, I could say, are you ready to take online classes? And they'll say yes or no. And I could say, well, that's somewhat randomized because I didn't go out and search out particular people. I just took the people who were showing up. But if you think about it, that's a terrible way to conduct a survey, because who am I conducting the survey on? I'm conducting the survey on people who are coming on campus. Well, the people who are coming on campus are probably more comfortable with being on campus than the people who are not coming on campus. So see how my decision about how to collect that data is affecting the data that I get. The best way to do it, and this is actually really difficult, the best way to do this would be to take everyone who's a student at the school, so we get everyone's 900 ID number. You all, I don't know if you know, when we talk about 900 numbers, it's your identification code at the school. It starts with 900, and then you all have a string of numbers after that. So we just call them 900 numbers. If we could get a computer to go in, say I wanted to ask 200 people, right? We'll talk about sample sizes in the course that'll come up. But let's say I wanted to ask 200 people. What is your opinion about online classes versus on-ground classes? Are you ready to come back in the spring? What we'd want to do is have the computer just randomly pick 200 people, right? Computers have programs for this where there's randomization options in basically every computer language. So we could type it in, okay, from these 900 numbers, randomly select 200. And then what you're going to get some students who are taking on-ground classes. You're going to get some students who are taking online classes. You're going to get some students who are taking hybrid classes. You're going to get a whole variety of students. That way, everyone is getting involved in your survey. But now there's a problem. Okay, I have these 200 students that I want to ask. How do I get a hold of them? Right? Well, one way the school likes to get a hold of people is with your school email address. And I'm sure half of you, at least in the room, know the problem with that is that, I'm sure a large portion of you go, wait, I have a school email address? We have very low participation in people responding to those emails, those school emails. Some of you have it set up so it forwards it to your personal account, but we have students that, they get dropped from classes because the school emails them and says, oh, you're off the wait list. You've now moved into the class. You have 24 hours to pay your fees. They never get that email, and then they get dropped from the class by the computer. So once I have my list of 200 people that I want to survey that was selected randomly, that's the randomization we're talking about, it's still hard to find those 200 people and get them to answer the survey, right? If we send 200 people an email, we'd be lucky to hear back from a fourth of them, 25% of them, right? Usually. So then we could try to find them in their classes and say, okay, here, can you take this survey or whatever? But that takes a lot of work. Imagine all these teachers going around. That takes a lot of time. And since you're paying the teachers now, their time instead of teaching classes is now spent trying to find these people and give them a survey. It takes money. So so it's difficult. Setting these things up is a difficult thing to do. So you always want to think about that early on. It's not just picking good questions. It's also picking, like, how do I pick the people who I'm going to get the data from? And I'm just pointing it out. We in this class, we are breaking one of those already because you were all not picked randomly to take this survey. You were picked, you were picked because you're in the class. So, for instance, you're all in an online class. If I gave a question about online classes, you're all more likely, we're probably going to be skewed towards more positive results. I know many of you in this class probably don't like that you're in an online class, but you took it, right? So all the people that are really against online classes, they didn't take this class. So we're not getting any of those opinions in our conversation. So that's going to skew our data. It's going to make it seem like people are more favorable to online classes. That's why we have to randomize this kind of stuff. There is studies versus experiments. Basically, an experiment is when you do something that changes the outcome and then you see what happens. A study is when you look at something that's happening and you make observations, but you don't change anything. So, for instance, at a conference once, I went to a discussion about red light cameras, and the person had a big statistical breakdown about the fact that a lot of places when they put in a red light camera, what they do is they shorten the distance of the yellow light. Why? Because if you shorten the distance of a yellow light, someone is more likely to get caught on the red, more likely to get a ticket. So this person went around town. They said, okay, I found the yellow light times of all the red light cameras, and then I went around to all the intersections that don't have red light cameras, and I measured those yellow lights, and here's the statistical analysis of that data. And guess what? He was right. They're shortening the yellow lights so that you're more likely to get a ticket, which sounds pretty unethical when that's your own city government trying to stick it to you. It's not really the purpose of red light cameras is to get more people to run red lights, right? We actually want to stop the behavior. But in that case, cities were using it as a revenue income stream rather than as a deterrent to run red lights. So in that case, that's an observational study. When he was standing at those street corners and timing the yellow lights, he wasn't changing the yellow lights. They weren't changing because he was there. The event was already occurring, and that event wasn't changing because he was there recording those times. So that is an observational study. Okay. A designed experiment, for instance, would be you give a certain medication, right? You give a group of people a medication because you think it's going to increase the effectiveness of them fighting cancer. You're actually changing that person's outcome. So that's the biggest way of determining, is something an observational study or it is a designed experiment, is ask yourself, is what I'm doing changing the outcome of something, right? Are we actually making something else occur by, say, giving someone an experimental drug? Then we're changing their course of getting healthy, right? Versus if we just watch people, I don't think they do it anymore, but they used to tell people with heart conditions to take aspirin. We could just watch. If I'm a doctor, I can watch my patients who take aspirin. I can watch the ones who don't, and I can record who's having heart trouble and who isn't. In that case, I'm not telling them to do something different. I'm just watching them do what they're already doing, right? So observational study, you watch something occur, but you don't interact with it. Designed experiment, you're actually conducting something that has to occur. Now, then we have things like double blinding and blinding. It's really hard to not be biased in these kinds of things, because if you're working on something statistically, you probably care about it, right? If you're working, that's a good comment. So there's a comment here. So statistics is not necessarily math, but used all over the world too. Yes. So I would put statistics in a different category from math. It uses numbers, but it's different, right? It's a different type of beast. And math is actually a much broader topic than most people think it is. Because most people have just been exposed to algebra, a few to calculus. There's many areas of math beyond that. But yeah, statistics is kind of a different beast, and can get used different ways, right? So if you're working on statistics, you probably care about those statistics. If you're researching, survival rates of the naked mole rat in its natural environment, right? You probably care about those things. You went, there was a reason that you got a biology degree so you could study these types of things, and you're interested. There's a question you want to know about why does the naked mole rat like almost never get cancer? Cancer basically doesn't exist in the naked mole rat. They're kind of amazing little creatures. And you're fascinated by them, so you want to study them. So you probably you're interested in them in some way. And if you're interested in a topic, it is hard to not be biased about that topic, right? This is the kind of thing society itself is already talking about bias. This is a big thing in education in a different type of setting about people being biases and learning what you're biased to, because it's very easy to be blind to your own biases. In statistics, you can be biased to your own stuff. If you work for Philip Morris and if you work for Philip Morris and they say, here's some statistics, get back to me when you've run the numbers. Well, if you go to your boss, you work for Philip Morris and you go to your boss and say, okay, we ran the statistics and yes, it appears that smoking is addictive, and it does appear that people who smoke regularly die at a higher rate of cancer, lung cancer, lip cancer, whatever. Guess what's going to happen? You're going to be cleaning out your desk at the end of the day, and you'll be going home and you'll be looking for a new job, right? And you know that. You know that because you went to work as a statistician for a cigarette company. You know what they want the statistics to say, and if you want a paycheck, it's in your best interest to make sure that's what the statistics say. So you always want to be careful about who's doing the statistics. But even if you're trying to do good for the world, maybe you think, I'm going to go study the naked mole rat because they get a low rate of cancer, and I want to try to apply that to humans and maybe come up with a new treatment for humans to reduce their cancer. And you really want to find that cancer cure. That's going to affect how you do your research. Even if you're trying to be honest and you're trying to do everything right, but you're really convinced there's a cure in there, you might make decisions along the way that overemphasize the effects of what it is that you're trying to study. It's really hard to get away from bias. So what we try to do is called blinding. So that is the people conducting the experiment shouldn't really know who's who. So we have a thing called a control group, and that the control group should just be doing the normal thing, versus the group in the other group should be doing whatever's different. So let's say we're studying smoking. Okay, our control group would just be people who don't smoke, and then we would have the group of people who smoke, right? Well, if I'm the doctor who's making the decision about who's collecting the data, it wouldn't be good for me to know who the smokers are and who the non-smokers are, because if you come in and you're a smoker and you cough, I might go, well, yeah, that cough's probably from the smoking, right? And then I'll put that down that you're having side effects. Whereas someone who doesn't smoke comes in and they have a cough, I'll go, oh, it's probably just a cold, right? But I shouldn't be making those judgments because based on what group you're in. What should happen is I shouldn't know if you're in the smoking group or the non-smoking group. So then how do I know? Well, this is where things get expensive. I now have to hire an assistant to spend time, and he or she will make 2 lists of names. One's the smoking group, one's the non-smoking group. So he or she knows who's who, but when the patient comes in and talks to me, I don't know if they're a smoker or a non-smoker. So that way when they cough, I don't go, yeah, it's because you're smoking, or if I know they're a non-smoker, I go, that's probably just your cold. I don't know. So that means that my bias can't affect my decision, right? And then later, once all the data is collected, then my assistant can let me know, here's the smokers, here's the non-smokers, and then we could go from there. But it won't affect my observations that I'm making because I don't know who's in which group, right? So that's called blinding. And sometimes they have double blind where you generally don't want the people in the group to know which they're in. You can't help it with smoking. People know whether they smoke or not. So there's a difficulty. If you can, that's why they give people placebos. Let's just say I have a new pill and everyone's going to take this pill. One group of people will take a pill, which ends up just being a sugar pill or nothing in it. They eat it and basically there's no medicine in it. The other people take the pill and there is medicine in it, but the people don't know. All they know is they took a pill, right? So because there's the placebo effect, if people think they're taking a medicine, they actually get better. So a certain percentage of them will get better just from thinking they took the right medicine. Science doesn't really understand the placebo effect yet. It's kind of weird, but they're working on it. They're making progress on understanding the placebo effect, but we don't completely understand it yet. So there's blinding. We don't want the patients taking it, if we can help it, to know, right? Like I said, sometimes you can't help it. Like if it's smokers, people know they're smoking. But if it's a new pill, you can give everyone a pill. Sometimes the pill doesn't have the medicine. You can have them in 2 groups. And then hopefully the double blinding, me as the doctor shouldn't really know, because I don't want it to affect my observations that I'm making when we do this kind of work. Okay, or when I'm, whatever we're doing during the process. I can learn afterwards when I'm crunching data, but we don't want it to affect my observations that I'm making. Okay, looks like I'm a couple minutes over. Thanks, everybody, for sticking around. For anyone who came in late, so a couple big things. I saw a lot of people forming groups in the chat. Good work. Get that done. If you're still going, oh, wait, I'm not in a group, try to do something about that. Yes, all the due dates for Chapter 1 are set. So there was a question about the due dates. The Chapter 1 due dates, make sure you get everything completed in time. And then the bookstore has your access codes. I would get them now, right? Because if you go get it today or tomorrow, then you know for sure you're getting it for free. If you wait and they run out, could be a problem. So I would get in there and get that before the other class, because there's other classes using the same program. They might snatch all those up. So try to get your free programs. Okay, I'm going to turn off the YouTube stream. Anyone can hop into Zoom and ask me questions, and I will work with you until we get everything figured out. And otherwise, I will see you next week. Thanks, everybody. Try to make sure you're progressing with things. All right, thanks, everybody.